Okay, it looks like we're recording now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, hey everybody from Boundaryless, it's Dave and Danielle. We wanted to walk you through the Preliminary Intent Navigator tool that we've been prototyping and working on. And so if I would give you, I'd give you a little bit of context on what we're interested in collaborating in the ecosystem space, and then kind of how that led us to the development of this tool um, as a way to augment Platform Design Toolkit. Then Danielle's going to kind of walk through, give an overview of how the tool works, and we'll talk about various purpose and approach to the various aspects of the tool. So in terms of the things that we're interested in, um, and this tool represents one of those areas, is kind of this zooming in and out around the intention that a group has as they are working on platforms and ecosystems. In our experience, the tendency for many groups is to very quickly focus on how to transform a value chain through platform thinking. And so we wanted to, based on our knowledge of mindsets and how they progress as people develop, we wanted to see if we could broaden that exercise around kind of the power of ecosystems and platforms to do more meaningful things. And so this zooming in and out is really what's kind of embodied in this tool that we're going to show you guys today. The second area that we're interested in is also around broadening the concept of ecosystems, and it's measuring and modeling how energy, matter, value, information flows in an ecosystem. And there's an emerging area around measuring and modeling flow as an aspect of all ecosystems. So we're interested in that. And then the last one is, based on our experience in the ecosystem space, we recognize the importance of people's mindset and how they view what they're trying to achieve or accomplish in an ecosystem. And many times that comes back to fundamental ways of thinking about relationships and collaborating in groups and spanning boundaries. So that's the third area that we're interested in. So, to get back to the zooming in and zooming out, we developed this tool. And really, this is modeled after spiral dynamics. Each of these quadrants represents a mindset or way of thinking about potentially what you might want to accomplish with an ecosystem or a platform. So the zoom in upper right quadrant represents the orange spiral dynamics meme. The lower right quadrant, the zooming out around the broader ecosystem or the long tail, is the green community meme. The yellow meme is represented in the lower left quadrant around considering different ways to model ecosystems. There are many different ways that you can do that depending on how you're thinking about that. And the yellow meme is very much about challenging the way that our current operating systems around the globe work based on the kind of capitalistic system, and thinking about post-capitalist type opportunities and ways to organize. So this lower left quadrant is very much about that. And then the upper left quadrant is the turquoise meme, which is a holistic meme that's trying to put all of these other things together within a context or an intent that may have a broader, more purposeful intention around social causes or societal level issues that we're all dealing with, so that people working on ecosystems can envision ways that what they're doing fits into those larger, more holistic types of value propositions. All right, so Danielle, you want to talk a little bit more? Just let me know how you want me to navigate.
Yeah, can you start by zooming out a little bit to see the vision canvas?
Yeah.
So in terms of kind of the approach to go through this tool, we started with a pretty blank vision canvas on the left. And now I guess if you can zoom into that itself. When you're done with the vision canvas, you can kind of copy and paste the sticky notes over and take them with you. But you basically just open the session with a conversation amongst the team that's going through it around what their vision is. And so it's kind of a silent brainstorming activity where people put sticky notes in around what they think part of the vision is of what they're working on. And then it becomes a clustering discussion where you just put similar thoughts together. And then as a group, you're a little bit more aligned to what people are interested in working towards and where they see themselves and the group going. So then those generate some ideas of what that group could be doing with their platform strategy. And so it helps to be a primer for moving into the preliminary intent tool. So if you zoom back out
Yeah,
and
and
then over.
yeah, and while I'm doing that, when we prototyped this a couple different times with some different folks and among ourselves, we try to just jump into this preliminary intent navigator, and it was a little disorienting to try to do that. So that's why we thought it was important to start with a vision canvas, just to get people talking about what they want to do. Okay,
Yeah,
you want me to go into the
I'm
platform?
just going to make a general comment first. So at that point, you'll have some idea of how specific the vision is among the group, or if it's still kind of broader and it might be purpose oriented, if it's something like an NGO. So at this point, it's up to the facilitator to decide which quadrant you start in. But in general, you would probably start in one of the top two. So either then talking about what's our broad or massive transformative purpose. And you could alternatively, if it's a group that's very focused on, for example, a very specific platform idea, you might start in with the top right with platformization to help them get their ideas down and then be a little bit more free to think about other things now that they've got their ideas kind of out of their head and onto the canvas. So let's just start with the platformization quadrant. And here, basically, you can either start with listing out the value chain that you feel you're part of, or the value chains that you could be part of, or by listing out specific platform plays. So it can go either way, but basically by the end of this quadrant here, you'll have connected any platform ideas you have to a value chain. So you'll want both in there. And I think in general, we found it easier to start with platform plays and then list the value chains and connect them after the fact. And then within the platform plays, we broke it out into two types. One is around an existing product or service, and the other is around enabling an ecosystem. And this aligned with the Cheshire Triangle work that had been done. There are two major platformization trends. And so these kind of embody those major trends. Anything else you want to comment on that, Dave?
Yeah, I was just going to say that as you're zooming in on this, it makes sense to have people talk about, very specific ideas that are coming to mind as they're being creative. And then I think the way that we've done it a number of times is once you come up with those ideas, it is a process of starting to zoom out, which prepares you for going to the next quadrant as you identify the value chains associated with each of these ideas. To understand how they play in a broader value chain. Yeah, so that was the only other comment I wanted to make.
Okay, and so then at this point, if you were to just do this sort of exercise and continue into the Platform Design Toolkit, you get pretty focused in on your value chain and in different ways you can analyze it or intuitively think through it. So that's also kind of broadly one of the reasons we thought this was a complementary activity, is that it allows people to take a step back for a minute before getting into the details too much. So then at this point, you're already starting to get into the details. So then we've flipped back to the quadrant to the left, in the upper left, to zoom out again before you get into the details.
Okay, and then just one other comment, again, to reground this quadrant is associated with the orange prosperity mean in spiral dynamics, which is a very entrepreneurial, strategic oriented kind of mindset. So the ability to really kind of dig into how you can apply platform thinking in a platform model and curate ecosystems would be largely embodied in this exercise. So you want to go left to turquoise, or you want to go to down to green?
We can go down to green.
Okay.
So then this quadrant here is about thinking more broadly about what ecosystem are you part of, and recognizing that there's a long tail market and long tail participants that a lot of times in the industrial model you're not thinking of. So this is just a series of questions for, again, group brainstorming and discussion to try to think through what additional opportunities might not be immediately obvious when you're just thinking about your existing value chain. So on the left here, we're asking people to think about the broader value chain. So for example, if you're in the food industry and your value chain is related to producing soybeans, then the broader value chain might be something like producing food just more in general. And then that brings in additional participants that you may not have initially been thinking about as part of your ecosystem. So the point is to recognize that you're actually part of a pretty broad and complex ecosystem and socioeconomic system, and we want people to think about all the impacts that they have beyond just the initial business partners they might be thinking of. So after you ask them what the broader value chain is, and that might require some discussion for them to figure out, then you ask them what additional participants does that bring in that are part of that broader value chain, and you list them out, and then that can become a good reference later when you're doing something like figuring out who you're designing for. And then finally, with that broader ecosystem in mind, you can think about what long tail use cases are now a little bit more obvious. And so we broke this up into the private, public, and social sector so that people recognize when you're doing an ecosystem strategy to think outside the box of just whichever sector you're currently in, especially because some complex problems of today require collaboration across the sectors. So the long tail use cases, we just wanted people to think through the interplay between the sectors as well. And so again, this is people listing out the ideas that they might have where, oh, if we're doing a platform, then we might include the public sector and some nonprofits that are working on the same, sticking with the food example, maybe nonprofits like the organic food movement or regenerative growers or something like that might come into mind when otherwise you wouldn't have thought of it.
All right, just a couple other comments on this. Again, this quadrant represents the green community meme in spiral dynamics. So we want people to kind of shift their orientation as they're thinking through what they want to do to a more of a community orientation. And many times in the organizations we work with, they think of an ecosystem from an I mindset, meaning how can I utilize an ecosystem to achieve what I want to achieve. And so what we're trying to do here is kind of facilitate a shift in orientation from an I to a we mindset, where people start to recognize and understand that they're part of a larger community that is capable of doing things that they couldn't do as individuals, or individual organizations, or individuals themselves. So this we mindset, this community orientation, is largely what we're trying to achieve with this quadrant.
Okay, so now can we go up to turquoise?
Yep. So I'm going to stay zoomed out.
Yeah. So then with a broader ecosystem in mind, you can think about broadly what are the impacts or potential opportunities such a large group of constituents could be part of. And the other piece of this, the big question underneath zoom out purpose is what's the significance and attraction for others? So there's basically, if you're able to have a broader underlying purpose, you can attract more people because of their intrinsic motivation to contribute to it, or their alignment with that purpose. So having in general a purpose statement is useful for driving adoption because people might be more inclined to be part of that as almost a movement rather than just a business model. So what we did in this quadrant is we pulled in some things that people may or may not be aware of, but on the left is what might you want to do as an organization, not an organization, as a strategist or somebody going through the tool to avoid or help adapt to existential risks. So we listed out some of the major existential risks that we have today that I think humans have the ability to influence how it turns out. And I think that this is, it's linked in the underlying text to where we pulled these from. But there's climate, health pandemics, nuclear war, ecosystem collapse in terms of our biodiversity, biotechnology gone bad, and AI gone bad. So those are things that people can think about as a quick reference as to what might be something we want to help an ecosystem adapt to or have an ecosystem geared towards avoiding. And then the other piece here is how much you align with emerging values. So emerging values of individuals and groups that also can help attract people into an ecosystem model. And so these again are aligned with the spiral dynamics mindsets. So you see it goes from orange to green to yellow to turquoise. And so they represent the emerging values that people in those mindsets embody generally. So with orange, there's personalization, convenience, and price utility. So this is a lot of traditional platform models are working towards that, obviously, like the Amazon model. And then the green is labeled as people. So this is about being social, open, and sharing. And yellow is about being purposeful. And again, actually, these are the 4 Ps. We've aligned it to that framework to be a little bit familiar. In the yellow meme, it's about looking at the operating system to be more inclusive, more humane, or transparent. And then turquoise is about looking at the whole system and its health. So models that are regenerative, sustainable, and minimal. So those are kind of just conversation starters for the group to go through to think about what purpose do they most align with? Do they really want to embody it? And it's been shown that organizations that have a clear, concise, massive, transformative purpose are more successful. So just asking participants to think about those things and then turn it into a statement around what is the purpose that they're driving towards. So here we just have one sticky note, but it could be a little bit like the vision canvas where people are brainstorming and then you try to come to consensus or work towards a few that you think are potentials to focus on.
Okay.
And then if you don't have anything to comment, we'll go to the last one.
Yeah, I'll just comment again, reinforce that this quadrant represents the turquoise meme, which is a very holistic way of thinking about how everything that we do is interconnected, and there are implications of all of our actions and behaviors. So as we're trying to create value more in a sense for our business selves, we're not separate or distinct from larger issues that are going on the planet. So making sure that there's an awareness of that, and that there is an ability for business to make a difference in some of these larger impact areas. All right, so we'll go down to the yellow quadrant.
Yeah. And this one is probably best reserved for last, because it's asking, now that you have zoomed out, zoomed in a little bit, and thought about where your focus is and what opportunities exist, what kind of model do you want to underpin it? And I think this is something that is touched on not so much in a lot of existing frameworks, but it's very important in terms of the success or the long-term success of your model, in terms of eventually generating network effects or accidentally creating a competitive disadvantage for yourself, where it just imbalances a market and opens up opportunities for others to create a competing platform that others have no reason not to switch to. So this underlying model is important for the impact and equality and transparency of how whatever ecosystem you're trying to enable operates. So what we did is we broke it down into a few different properties of an ecosystem model or the platform model that you'd be creating, just as, you know, conversation starters, and then it gets people thinking about different things that are part of the model, and then also how they might start considering trade-offs and what they feel about each of these different attributes. And then the idea would be, at some point you would have a more detailed exercise to think through the model, and this might potentially bring in things like flow networks and mimicking healthy natural systems with your own model, and being able to do that at least a little bit before you get into prototyping. And then the model is something that you would also start prototyping. So just running down these attributes, in the middle is the label of the attribute, and then it's a spectrum of, you know, one extreme to the next. So access, that relates to who is able to join the ecosystem or be part of the platform, and that can go from being completely open to, you know, a closed set of participants who are specified. Then on the next one is innovation, and this is from basically making it a really organic marketplace that anybody can innovate on, anybody can add in, to being something that is more just an offering, and your company is the only one responsible for generating the innovation, and you've got a specific thing that you do. So it's a little bit like being open versus closed as well. And then data is about, you know, almost every digital platform has some data that's being generated. So are you open sourcing that? Are you open with it? Do you give it back to the participants, or do you close that off and make it proprietary? And then governance is about how you as an organization make decisions. And this is definitely an emerging area with decentralized autonomous organizations and blockchain. This is being explored in a radically more participatory way than our traditional organizations. So on the far left, that's participatory, where everybody has a say in decisions. And then towards the right, it's designated, where you have leaders who are making all the decisions. And the last one is value. And this is really to get people thinking about the plurality of value types. And especially, again, with blockchain, there's things like the ability to create tokens, and that gives kind of new superpowers to platform designers. So the value can be, on the left side, non-exchangeable, and we think of that as things that are inherently valuable to humans for us to stay healthy. But if you go out and do something, nobody's going to pay you for it. So it's not an exchangeable value. It's something that people need to be doing but aren't. And that's closely linked to like commons preservation, and that everybody depends on the commons, but nobody's on the other side of the transaction to give you value for it. And then on the other side is exchangeable value, and that's what we're pretty familiar with today. Everything's a transaction with another person who you give them something, they give you something. So that's to kind of open up a conversation around some new possibilities of value. So then overall, you'll basically take the yellow slider as you're going through this with a group, and just each of them is a mini conversation, and you can just put the slider where they're feeling most aligns with what they're interested in doing. So here, a lot of the sliders are more towards the left, and some of them are towards the middle, and that's representative of a combination of being, very open with innovation and access, but at the same time trying to be practical with governance and value. So it's something that can then be referenced later around, what were we thinking when we first thought about model considerations.
And then just some other comments. Again, this is the yellow quadrant, which is the first Spiral Dynamics Tier 2 we mindset oriented meme. And a couple of things. Again, this is about defining or thinking about the model or structure or the operating system and how its characteristics may be different from what people are used to seeing in our traditional markets. The other thing that comes to mind here is this conversation that came out of the Joe Norman podcast, and the conversation that Simone and Stina were having with Joe around the concept of architecture. This is very much an architecture type quadrant, thinking about the architecture. And this spectrum of the role of the architect being around directing or guidance or driving or facilitating potential direction of an ecosystem versus this kind of enabling an organic unfolding or an emergence. So that's very much what this area is about. All right, so are we going to go through example now, or are we ready for that?
Yep, I think so.
Okay, so I'll make a few comments in case those that are watching the video are not interested in going through the example, because we kind of walked through the tool. But I wanted to say 4 things. We'll share a link to this Mural board so that people can spend time taking a look at this and maybe envisioning how they might iterate it with us. We're also working on a Google Doc, which is basically a walkthrough of these steps, so that if you want to look at that Google Doc on the steps of how you would utilize this tool, at least how we're envisioning it now. And then we're also thinking about 2 blog posts. One that is a teaser post if it's decided that we want to make one of the breakout sessions for the July 23rd event focused on this tool. We can do that, and we can we have even an initial draft of a teaser post that kind of talks about this, and it builds on some previous writing that we've done around this topic. And then also the last area is we would like to write a more specific post walking through an example, whatever that example might be. We've thought about doing this around climate change or urban agriculture. The example we're going to go through with you today is actually on Boundaryless and Boundaryless' business model. So those are some of the things that we're working on. Would love to get your feedback on those as well. Okay, so just going back to the example quickly, I'll just highlight some of these, right, of what we're thinking. Again, this is how could Boundaryless use this tool for their own business. So then in the vision area, Danielle and I kind of did some solid brainstorming, and we came up with looks like 4 different areas here that were themes that resulted from our clustering. One was this moving beyond platform design or platform thinking more into the organizational impacts and the future of organizing. This is obviously a big part of what Boundaryless is doing with their current white paper research. So that could be a part of the vision to move your business model in that direction. One was then developing out your level of support for the adopters community and how that community might broaden and become more action oriented around supporting each other in projects. Then there's this more purposeful one around a role that Boundaryless might take in addressing some of society's needs, and then that kind of leads to the one down the bottom around how Boundaryless might take a more active or architectural role in the curation of various types of ecosystems. So those were some of the highlights there. Again, we'll share a link so you can zoom into what some of these posted say. Then we next went to the platformization. And again, we kind of went right to left on this, if I remember correctly, because it's kind of a natural flow to think of some ideas after doing a visioning exercise. So here are some of the platform plays that we thought of, those around building on the current PDT platform and set of canvases to kind of perhaps make an app-like store, which enables people to create things like this Platform Intent Navigator as an app or a tool that could augment Platform Design Toolkit, and then more creating a community of advisors or service providers that have services that complement what Boundaryless and Platform Design Toolkit does. Those were some of the product-oriented ideas we had. And then in terms of amplifying existing ecosystems, there's a whole ecosystem around strategy consulting, where there are different disciplines that could be complementary to what Boundaryless does. And you could create or enable that community. I think Bill Fisher and Simone were trading tweets that I was following around this concept of applying rent and high to local and small and medium businesses. An idea here around creating an entrepreneurial network, or basically broadening the interoperability of micro enterprises or micro communities from the higher example. And then the last one is just around perhaps having something very focused on a social cause like climate change. So those are some of the ideas that we came up with. Would love to potentially do an exercise like this with Boundaryless around some of these. Then trying to tie those back into specific value chains. We try to identify those. So we've got a value chain around collecting clients with advisors, one around research and innovation on Platform Design Toolkit, one on the strategy development process, and then one very broad one around curating ecosystems. So that's how we kind of looked at this first one in terms of trying to get some initial discussion going around ideas and platformization around value chains. So then we went down next to the green quadrant, or the broader ecosystem. And this was, like I had said earlier, a more natural kind of zooming out exercise. We had identified ideas above, we had identified some potential value chains. And then we asked, okay, what is the broadest value chain we can think of that all of these potential ideas and value chains fit into? And we thought it was the value chain associated with innovation. And that's this very broad value chain that starts with an idea and ends up with some world-changing scaled product or service. Right? And so we thought it was good to come up with what that value chain is, and then start to think, okay, if we think that broadly, who are the other participants that would participate in this? So we've got a number of different areas here, from participants that focus more on ideas, or participants that focus more on scaling viable solutions of products and services. So you can see those there. I won't go through those. And then here, we think this area of kind of envisioning what your long tail might look like also is a good area to potentially identify market making moves, or where to start, or establish a beachhead with various types of community players where you might seek adoption around whatever they're trying to do. So just a few examples here. We've got the SMB local scenarios, and we got corporate innovation scenarios, which are kind of different segments of potential long tail in the private sector. In the public sector, there's a lot of different things. Innovation with federal governments, or maybe rethinking the city, are just a couple of ideas we came up with. And then in the social sector, obviously, Boundaryless is taking an active role in platformizing or assisting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There could be scenarios there as well, and other types of social change type examples. Then the next two, there's less content specifically. I'll go back up to turquoise. I think after looking at these various potential inputs to how you might develop a massive transformative purpose that you publish and becomes a part of attracting people to what you're trying to accomplish. I think the one we came up with here was more around the ability to architect, reshape organizations that basically allow everyone to thrive and address some existential threats. Not a real polished transformative purpose statement there, but you can get a sense for, after going through this exercise, how you might be able to shape and polish and iterate on what that purpose would be. Then the last one, there isn't any specific content, I think, for Boundaryless. Again, this last one is just looking at how you would structure, organize, or work with others to enable an ecosystem to emerge and evolve. So, okay, I think that's pretty much what we wanted to try to accomplish in working through this. Danielle, any other thoughts or comments?
Just kind of in general, this is envisioned to be one of the first things you would do. And then obviously we're still prototyping it and looking for inputs on revisions and working with people to figure out, how it evolves. But the other part is that I don't think we're completely settled on is if there's one process you move through after the fact, or if it becomes almost a 4-part compass with a set of tools and canvases that come out of helping you to explore each quadrant more. And so, for example, the right half with platformization and the long tail, or your broader ecosystem, to me, I feel like the Platform Design Toolkit addresses how to explore that half of this tool in more depth. But I feel like there could be development of tools on the left half to help people develop those thoughts more. So just some things that I think we were thinking about and trying to come up with or think about for future development is that after this, you might have some different options of what you do next.
Yeah, that's a great point. We hadn't talked a lot about where to go from here after doing this, and there's certainly a lot of work that can be done on the left-hand side. A number of things that we've worked on in this space have, set of content and exercises that we've worked through and worked on for various things on the left-hand side. So yeah, that's a good point. Would be happy to kind of discuss with everyone from Boundaryless how they think this tool might be utilized, how it might flow with some of the other assets and content and Platform Design Toolkit. And Danielle and I maybe even sharing some more stuff that we've done around this left-hand side. So yeah, so very good. Look forward to hearing what you guys think of this tool, how you think we might be able to collaborate further on it, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.